We're in the middle of the chapter on what appears to be. We read consciousness is expressed in mind, and we read that the nature of consciousness is unconditioned, and we read all the material about human consciousness and about Leelaa, which is a good start. So over on page 47, the world is a state of hypnotism, and I was starting to do next week's stuff. And I had two paragraphs that I couldn't figure out where it belonged in next week's stuff, and that was because it belonged in this week's stuff. So we'll start by Jay reading these two paragraphs which you don't have, and then we'll go around the room.
Everything in mind is an effect. Everything mind produces is an effect of the consciousness governing it. Mind is not a cause. When what is the cause, mind generates harmonious effects. When human consciousness is the cause, the effects are good and bad. Either we're aligned with what is, or our consciousness is filled with the realization of the nature of what is, or we're aligned with the human consciousness and our individual consciousnesses is filled with dualistic concepts. And we experience what our individual consciousness contains. We can either have an experience reflecting the nature of what is, or the nature of human consciousness. That's the real bottom line about what appears to be. There are not any powers of good or evil out there which are manipulating us or causing anything to happen to us. What's out there is the effect of our consciousness being formed as our experience, literally. There's nothing out there but effect. It's easy to say, but it's really difficult to get this at the level that will change your life. There is nothing out there but effect. The effect of your consciousness being formed within mind. Just as in a dream, there is nothing in the dream but the effect of the content of the subconsciousness of the dreamer. It's all effect, it's all illusion, it's all Maya, it's all the Leelaa.
Anything? So you go home now? All right, let's continue with the world of the state of hypnotism. Go ahead, bring please 3D book. Oh, here. This is the one we pass around. Thanks, pass it to you. Write it down here.
The world is a state of hypnotism. Again, God is consciousness, infinite consciousness. Man and the universe is this consciousness formed, expressed. And therefore, since consciousness is incorporeal spirit, man and the universe are incorporeal spirit. Therefore, just as we cannot see consciousness with our eyes and never will, neither can we see man or the universe with our eyes. We have never seen a tree, we have never seen a flower as they really are.
Get that? Okay.
All that we see with our eyes is finite five senses, concepts of creation formed in mind, based on belief in human consciousness. So we see concepts that are sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes young, sometimes old, sometimes sick, sometimes well, sometimes alive, sometimes dead. But remember, these are not creations of what is. These are creations of man-made concepts. When we look at each other, we don't see each other. We see concepts of each other that we have formed in mind, and everyone sees something different as our concepts differ.
What is formed creation, man, and the universe in its own image and likeness, of the same substance, same qualities, same quantity, same nature, same characteristics, so that all that is true of what is true of man and the universe. But this is not what appears to be. What appears to be seems to have as its nature every conceivable form of imperfection, lack, limitation, finiteness.
Are you hearing this? I see puzzled faces, but I don't hear any questions.
It's written so absolutely that it's difficult to form the first question. Especially with what we got off with. So
Yeah, that's
it takes a while to get kind of.
So let's pause and see what we are hearing.
And I'm not even sure how to form this question, but we're creating it. What are we basing it off? How did we make it up? What past experience did we have to create this? You know, like,
Here's
what
the
did it
question. Okay,
base from?
what is made the creation, a real creation? We as individual human beings, as individual expressions, are seeing imperfect view of what is its creation. And it's imperfect in a couple of senses. First of all, since we're identified with this physical body, we're limited by that identification to seeing things with our five senses. Okay? But that's what we're seeing is our concept of how things are. But we're seeing our concepts of what is created, mostly. And human consciousness is full of all sorts of different concepts about what is. You know, human consciousness thinks there is such things as good and bad and health and sickness and such like. So if we're attuned to human consciousness, then what we're seeing, then the five sense images that we're seeing of what is this creation include the conditions of good and bad and right and wrong and sick and well. If we were tuned in entirely to God, to what is this consciousness, then, and it'll say this later on, I'm pretty sure in here, but if we happen to be tuned in entirely to what is this consciousness, then even though I'm still believing that we have five senses, we'd still see material images of stuff. Nonetheless, it would start to reflect the nature of what is, which is to say we'd start seeing harmony and eternality and unchanging and things like that, rather than seeing all this good and evil and sick and well and such like.
But isn't the saying that human consciousness created good and evil and all the concepts?
It doesn't really create it. It's the idea of a through a glass darkly. It believes in it, and therefore we see that overlaid on the image in the mirror. It's like if we go back to that diamond with all the facets, and each facet is an individual one of us, and if you were outside the diamond looking in through the facet, you would be looking in at what is. But because of human consciousness and our relationship with human consciousness, let's let that be outside of the diamond somehow. My facet gets covered with stuff. We talked about that last week, I think. It's covered with mud. And so now when I'm looking in to see what is, what I'm seeing is a muddy what is. Okay? And I'm seeing a material what is, and I'm seeing a five sense what is, and I'm seeing a conditioned what is, because that's in my beliefs, which is like a filter over my view of what really is. In Zen, they talk about dust on the mirror, and they talk about cleaning the dust off the mirror where the mirror is mind, and it's the same concept exactly as what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm.
Then do these concepts of our human consciousness arise from our ignorance?
Mm-hmm. Yep, they're all ignorant beliefs that we pass around from one to another, back and forth, rattling around in human consciousness. 6 billion of us broadcasting them and receiving them and rebroadcasting them. And
The same is true when there were only 100,000 of us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on that thought too. It's like, well, you just said that we were the first generation, let's just use that phrase, the first generation that was created by what is, was created in what is like this.
I don't have an explanation for the reason that there's a first chapter of Genesis and a second chapter of Genesis. Nobody is willing yet to talk about why the mist came down upon us. And also, we can't talk about a first generation since mankind appeared all over the place. But the fact is that, well, let's talk about being born asleep, being born ignorant, being born into material, this fact that we're in this human experience, doing lifetime after lifetime, has started us back at very primitive man. And very primitive man had no consciousness at all and believed in magic and gods and thunderstorms, and very primitive man was getting killed. For some reason, and part of the Leelaa, part of the game, we start out having no presence of God in our individual consciousness, no awareness of God in our individual consciousness. That's the starting point in the Leelaa. And therefore we're believing all the material stuff, all the material good and bad and sick and well and death and saber-toothed tigers and all that sort of stuff. And there's no God in our life because we have no awareness of God in our life, and they're the same thing. So that's the Leelaa. I don't know why it is, and we can't, I'm not going to play the game of figuring out when people started believing in that stuff. We were born believing in that stuff. We were created. The human experience, the Leelaa, the play, was created believing that stuff. It was created in ignorance.
Isn't that the story that Joel tells, what the Genesis story is all about?
Yeah, there's chapter 1, which is the God's creation, and there's chapter 2 of Genesis, which is human creation. And the story in the Bible is that man ate of the fruit from the tree of good and evil, and was pushed out of the garden and was in this mist. Okay, so there's an acknowledgement in there that it's the belief in good and evil that's creating this mess, but it doesn't really explain. I'm not going to serpents and apples. It doesn't really, and thieves, it doesn't really explain where this came from. Nobody has an answer to that.
But it becomes a nice metaphor in the acceptance of what's not true, it's not real, and we accept that into our lives. We saw everything that wasn't, and we saw.
Yeah. The message is we believed we bought conditions, and we're kicked out of our paradise. And the statement is that if you're believing good and evil, you're not in paradise. And before we had any conditioning, we were unconditioned, which is to say, as created by God and as created by mind. When we were unconditioned, we were in paradise. And I don't know why the Leelaa is written the way the Leelaa is written, except it'd be pretty boring if it wasn't. So that's as much as we can say now. We'll see if anything more comes as we go on.
No, wouldn't I be blissful?
If you had no mind, if you had no thoughts, you would be. If you didn't think, you would be.
So it would be boring.
I don't think bliss is boring.
No.
Oh, you mean?
It would be boring if, I thought you said it would be boring if
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, maybe God finds it boring. Finds bliss boring. It's all God. It's not us. There is no us. We're an expression of God. Again, I don't know why the storyline in Leelaa is progressing from ignorance to bliss, but it appears to be. That's what appears to be. Let's go on.
Joel liked to use the word hypnotism. This word is a state of hypnotism, this world. When a person is hypnotized, he sees, hears, tastes, touches, and smells whatever the hypnotist puts in his mind. A hypnotist can conceive a subject that there's a white poodle in the room, and the person will see the white poodle, talk to it, pet it, maybe even worry about what to do with it. Of course, no one sees the white poodle; it doesn't exist. But the hypnotized person sees it. The hypnotist has the power of his or her mind to make the subject believe in the white poodle, so that her or his mind forms it for him or her to see.
Simply the statement that, you can be hypnotized to see things that aren't there. And you're convinced they're there, and you can pet them and play with them and do all sorts of things, and it's not there.
And, I've also heard on some of the Barbara, and I don't know about Joel, that she couldn't be hypnotized. Is that because she was at a certain level of consciousness? So if you're at that, you're above that, then?
Yeah, if you're aware that mind has no power, then it has no power. But if you believe that mind has power, then it has power.
So somebody who doesn't believe it has power can't be hypnotized. They can't. They have no power over them.
That's right.
They know the truth.
In fact, the reality of that story Barbara tells is that she was in a theater where there was a hypnotist performing, and she was just in the audience, and the hypnotist brought up the usual number of subjects and couldn't hypnotize any of them because of Barbara's consciousness. And she suddenly realized what was going on. I mean, she was doing nothing unintentionally. It was just her consciousness is that mind has no power, and so it didn't. And she realized what was going on and left. And the show went on, But it's that kind of a thing, which is sort of interesting. I love that story.
Didn't want to ruin your story.
Yeah, Poor guy. It's never happened to him before that he couldn't hypnotize anybody, Next.
We have over 6 billion people broadcasting human beliefs that are so strongly and consistently that we become hypnotized. Their beliefs become our beliefs when we see them formed in mind. Now, what is the substance of the white poodle? Hypnotism? Similarly, the substance of everything we perceive with our 5 senses is hypnotism. We never see, hear, taste, touch, or smell anything but forms of hypnotism. For example, so many people believe a flu virus has power, that it causes the appearance of flu. They are radiating this belief into human consciousness. Some of us respond to it, believe it, are hypnotized by it, and rebroadcast it for others to pick up. It's just a relay going around. Those of us who respond to it are probably afraid of being sick. We accept the belief when we receive it. Mind reflects it to us, and we come down with flu. Some of us don't believe in the power of the flu virus and don't respond to the suggestion. Some of us are so afraid of flu that we get flu shots. This demonstrates our belief that flu shots have power, which means that flu has power, so the belief outpictures, and we may catch the flu anyway, sometimes from the flu shots. Some of us don't worry about the flu and don't catch it, in spite of the lack of flu shots. It's just beliefs forming in mind. It's just beliefs rattling around in human consciousness, being sent and reinforced. That's what this experience is about at this level of consciousness. The beliefs that hypnotizes us are the ones that reflect our level of consciousness. The ones we don't react to, others at different levels of consciousness will.
Next.
Joel also talks about subliminal advertising. In subliminal advertising, frames with messages are inserted into a movie or television show, infrequently enough that the conscious mind does not register them, but frequently enough that the subconscious mind does register them. Many viewers who are unaware of the messages consciously will obey the message without thinking. Similarly, human beliefs are subliminally coming into our consciousness and determining our beliefs, hence our experience, unless we are aware of it. If we know the truth, if we understand how mind and human belief work and recognize the lies, then we are no longer available to be hypnotized by those beliefs in human consciousness that we used to respond to. We have raised the level of our consciousness.
Some examples of that would be
You're asking me for an example of that? Well, Joel talks about they used to, movie theaters, insert frames in the movie that told people to buy popcorn and Coca-Cola.
Right.
And nobody ever saw the fact that it was in the movie, but the popcorn and Coca-Cola sales would go up by 50, 60, 70% during that movie. So
what about the second part? Human beliefs subliminally coming into our consciousness.
Well, that's what the whole thing is. That's the source of the hypnotism, is the fact that all these people are radiating their beliefs, which come into our minds as the subliminal advertisements come into our mind without us knowing it. I mean, what you believe is in the one consciousness, and it's available for me to pick up. And the point of this is that with 6 billion people dropping the same sort of beliefs into the consciousness pool, it's so universally believed that it becomes a hypnosis to us. And we start believing it unless we know some truth contrary to it. And we pick up really the human beliefs that are appropriate for us at the level we're at. For instance, I will never pick up the belief in the power of breast cancer. And you ladies will not pick up the belief in the power of prostate cancer, because we're attuned to being male and female, and we pick up those beliefs that are appropriate for us. And we also pick up the beliefs that are appropriate for, I pick up what's appropriate for 60-year-old men in Hermosa Beach, perhaps, and may not get the beliefs of a 60-year-old man in Japan, because there are beliefs that we pick up with based on where we are, and we're also in the society where we belong to pick up those beliefs. So we're attuned to being hypnotized by what it is that corresponds to the level of consciousness that we're at.
That's pretty motivating to stop identifying with the self.
Mm-hmm. Or stop listening to human consciousness. You bet. I mean, it's just a cesspool of false beliefs out there that are constantly being reinforced. The point is that there's so many people believing this stuff, and so much television, and so much advertising, and so many movies, and so many books, and so many sitcoms, and so many soap operas, and on and on and on, that are all telling us the same lies, that we are hypnotized. Okay? And just simple. And we are hypnotized into believing that germs have power and cause disease. There's nobody in this room that doesn't believe at some level that they can catch the flu this winter. Now, some of us don't believe it very much, and we probably won't, because we're pretty sure we can't, and there's some of us that are really pretty clear that the flu has no power. But, very, very few people get to the point where they really know that the germ theory of disease, that there's no power in flu, and there's no such thing as cancer, and there's no power in AIDS, and there's no power in anything. There are no colds, there's no power in any germ. The world is so convinced that there are germs that cause sickness that we're all hypnotized into accepting that, and we constantly get reinforced by advertisements for medications and stuff. And if we go back and review the chapter on what is, it can't be. It can't be that any germ has any power to cause anything inharmonious. Because there is nothing inharmonious. It's all, when we see somebody with the flu, we're hypnotized. Because there is nobody with the flu. There can't be anybody with the flu. All there is God. God is harmonious, eternally harmonious. There can't be anybody with the flu. So if we see disease, we're hypnotized. Yeah.
I came across, I think it was in The Infinite Way, there was a paragraph I was reading this week, and it was a statement to the effect of, well, then why do some people that have a higher consciousness why do they still express some of the ills of humanhood? And in there he explains that it's because consciousness needs to be expressed. So even if somebody is of a very high consciousness, that sometimes somebody of high consciousness will still express, appearance of flu or whatever. Even he used the example of even as Christ, when he, returns, that there were still the marks of, the humanhood of, whatever that was, the story goes. And that those that it doesn't really, you don't really fully, I guess, drop it all away until the rate of ascension.
Until you're out.
I'm paraphrasing that.
Until you're out of here.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, he says, first of all, that every false belief will express, must be gotten out, which is part of the reason why infinite way healers occasionally will get sick. And the other thing, of course, is that regardless of how high you are, there are 6 billion people that are constantly telling you that flu has power. And unless you are constantly remembering the truth, unless you are constantly in the God consciousness, when you're back in human consciousness, here it comes. So it really comes down to whether you can stay in God consciousness all the time. And even Joel couldn't do that. Even Joel was like probably in consciousness 90 or 95% of the time. And even Joel had heart failure twice.
Yeah, well, even, reading that, it kind of, I guess a couple of weeks ago, that I was sharing, why is it knowing all this that I still have these expressions, and I was kind of like beating myself up, and then it was like after I read that, it was like, oh, okay, it's completely impersonal, it's like I may know the truth, but still, I'm going to have these expressions of humanhood, and, that it's not like I am thinking something, I'm creating this because I'm thinking this.
The thought is never really in you. The thought is always in universal human consciousness. Okay, the question is whether your station is tuned to K-God or K-Fuck. If you're tuned to K-G-O-D 24/7, then you in fact probably won't ever catch the flu. But if you're there 23/7, you're available. And if you're tuned to K-God, as we say here later, if you're tuned to K-God with respect to flu, but K-Fuck with respect to breast cancer, then you've got to deal with it individually all the way across the line until you really rise out of sight. And when you're done, you're not worrying about it.
So would you liken that? Would it be the same thing as to say, like, occasionally I will notice that I'm having a belief in lack, or that I'm having a big reaction emotionally to something, I'll get really reactive, like with my kids, and yell and scream or do something that totally doesn't line up with the truth about who I am or whatever. And I just remember Robert saying, become disinterested in Joanne. And that's what I do. I just look at that behavior that's totally uncharacteristic of my truth, whether it's sickness or a belief in lack or anger or whatever, and I just think nothing about it. Like I don't identify with it, I don't feel bad about it, I don't think anything about it.
Right, give it no energy.
Give it no energy, right.
Don't sustain it.
Right.
The other thing, of course, is knowing the truth is not sufficient. It's got to be part of your experience. It's got to drop a whole lot of levels deeper than knowing the truth. True statements have absolutely no power. We can't wave statements that flu has no power around and expect not to get the flu. Because the fact that we're waving it around so much probably means we're afraid of the flu, and so we think it does have power. So knowing is not what it takes. It takes experiencing. It takes practicing it and practicing it and practicing it and practicing. All this work is practice. That's why Barbara had all those flashcards that we're going to start using in the fall. Yes.
I've never heard germs described like you described them tonight. Could you say that germs are, but the fact that they're bad or that they cause something is just human perspective of
Yeah.
giving them that power. So
That's right.
there are germs, but we're the ones that say that they're bad or good.
Yeah, germs are a reflection of something in creation.
Because a couple years ago, my kids learned about germs. They'd never learned it from me, but they learned it from school or someplace. And they were asking me a lot of questions about them. And I think what I would have liked to say instead was that there are germs. It's just us who say that they're good or bad. You know, and
Us that determine whether they're good or bad. There can't be anything that causes disharmony. Can't be. If we're seeing disharmony, we're hypnotized. Yes.
So you're saying that we're picking all this stuff up, the hypnotism from the media, the television, all these different places. So obviously the solution would be to remove ourselves from those things as much as possible. But are you saying that even if we do that, we're still going to be picking up on the unconsciousness, regardless if we are removed from all of that, those things you mentioned?
Watching morning television before you go to work certainly doesn't help.
Right.
But there are lots of recorded experiments where on 2 islands in the Polynesians or somewhere, we'd have no communication back and forth. They would train some animal to walk, train a raccoon-like thing, some animal to wash its food or something. And went to the next island and discovered that the same animals over there were doing that. It's all unconsciousness. It's there, it's all going on.
So it might help for us to remove ourselves from those things, but it's not going to completely remove. It's not going to completely remove it. We have to do additional work to keep.
It'll take a great deal of the pressure off. But Rashneesh used to say, "It's very nice that you were able to go to the Himalayas and learn to meditate." He says, "I will be impressed when you can do it in the marketplace." Go to the Himalayas and find your center. And then slowly creep back here, maintaining it, and when you consider a marketplace in India has animals and taxi cabs and motorcycles and people and geese and chickens and hogs and camels running through all the time. It's an incredible noisy zoo. Music playing and such like, it's just insane, And he says, when you can sit down in the center of the marketplace and meditate, then I will be impressed. But start in the Himalayas. So and that's why we go on retreat. We go away on retreat and get quiet. We're in a very dense population area here, so it's a really good place to practice. Rashneesh also said if you really want to find silence, go find the noisiest place you can find. And then the silence will stand out in contrast to it. I actually used to park my motorcycle at the end of the runways at LAX and sit under the runway and listen for the silence while the jets flew overhead 500 feet up. And I found it. There it is. Oh, wow. Let's go on.
The point is that every appearance of error has to be hypnosis. It can't be real because the nature of everything that is real is eternal harmony and perfection. This harmony is the outpicturing of the beliefs in human consciousness. Therefore, there is no such thing as externalized real cancer, flu, unemployment, or lack. To the extent that we see such things, we are hypnotized. When we become dehypnotized, we will see things more in their true light. The contents of our consciousness will no longer be determined by the hypnosis from universal human consciousness.
Actually, we will be somewhat hypnotized.
Still do.
We will still be somewhat hypnotized to the extent that we continue to experience having a body. So we will still experience materiality through our five senses, rather than seeing spirit. But the experience will reflect more of the nature of consciousness, harmony, abundance, and fulfillment, as we stop believing all the lies in human consciousness. Error cannot exist. If what is all there is, what is the only creator. If what is the only creator, then for error to exist, what is would have to have created it. And since there is no creation separate from what is, this really means error would have to be an aspect of what is. But what is cannot contain anything at odds with itself and be eternal, unchanging harmony and perfection. There can't be anything destructive, or there would not be eternality. So there can't be error in the one reality. Then what is error? Everything that we call error or evil is hypnosis. The human belief in error being formed by mind. The universal human beliefs of error and evil that are being transmitted around are all lies. And they're impotent. There's nothing sustaining them except human consciousness itself. They have no power at all unless we believe them. But if we do, they outpicture in our individual experience, belief by belief. We might not fear flu germs, but still fear cancer. So we might never catch flu, but we could contract cancer. A lie has no power unless it's believed. False beliefs that are accepted manifest. Those that are recognized as a lie don't. Our work is to recognize the lies, knowing what the truth is, and replace the lies with the corresponding truth. Then the picture changes, demonstrating their innocence.
So if you were to see you would walk down the street and you would see somebody stab somebody. What would, I mean, you saw it, there it was. Let's say the person died.
Then you're hypnotized. Because there's no death in what is. You're seeing an expression of God, believing it can murder, and you're seeing another expression of God, believing it can get killed, and you're seeing a hell of a script event. You're seeing script acted out. And none of it happened. Joel says over and over again, nobody ever died. Nobody has ever died. Nobody has ever been sick. What is what is expressed as individual consciousness. Period.
You're saying that one person believed it could happen, and the other person believed it would happen to them.
And you believed it could happen, so you saw it.
So if I didn't believe it could happen, I wouldn't have seen it. Maybe other people would have seen it.
Well, I don't know. If you knew it didn't happen, I don't know what you would have seen. If you knew it was impossible, I mean, I don't know what Joel would have seen. Joel probably would have, actually, if Joel was there and witnessed that, the person probably wouldn't have died because of Joel's consciousness.
So is it possible to see it and just see the truth that the script, the event still happened, but you are not judging it as good, bad, or indifferent?
And if you see it clearly enough, that would be a healing. If the person, the victim, were sufficiently attuned to you to receive the healing. But if they're clinging to the fact that they've been killed, they're going to appear to die. And still, nobody died.
I keep going back to Joel having Parkinson's, but having that was just an expression of conscious.
Yeah.
Robert, and to believe in Parkinson's for him to
It changes there. Robert didn't have Parkinson's. You would say, who sees the Parkinson's? This is Robert's always question. How can you have Parkinson's disease, Robert? And he said, who sees the Parkinson's disease? I do. Who are you? The point is that the one who sees the Parkinson's disease is the personal sense in the human picture, in the Leelaa, who has become identified with the play and is watching it. Robert absolutely knew that he didn't have Parkinson's disease. He couldn't possibly. That wasn't his body any more than mine was his body. He told me that. He said that. He's looking right at me. He said, that's no more, this is no more my body than that one. He had no body. He says over and over, I'm not the body. I'm not this body. This body is not me. He was not hypnotized, okay? And so there was no Parkinson's.
So why did his body still reflect that then? Was it only the people seeing that, not him seeing it then?
I don't have a lot of clarity on that, but my sense is that he was so detached from the body that he wasn't maintaining it in any way. It's sort of interesting that Robert had Parkinson's, and Ramakrishna died of cancer, and Sargadada Maharaj died of cancer, and Ramana Maharshi died of cancer, and there's not a good history of enlightened people taking care of their bodies. But Joel also makes a point about that. He says that, and I guess this is the valid point, thank you, the healing consciousness doesn't necessarily come with enlightenment. Very few people who've had the mystical experience proceeded to demonstrate a life full of harmony and joy and carefreeness, health and all that. Almost none of them also got the healing consciousness.
Yeah, because if they know that's not them, why would they be interested?
They're not, and they didn't happen to have it. If they had the healing consciousness, then they would have been healthy all the way through, like Joel was, with the exception of his 2 slips. But the fact is that the healing consciousness, you don't necessarily get the whole... When you see enlightenment, when you get enlightenment, you become absolutely aware that that's not your body, but whether, there's an infinite number of scientific facts you can not know about that body. And then, most people that have the mystical experience don't get the healing consciousness. It very seldom happens.
And if you know that this existence is transitory, why would you spend your time clutching to stay with it?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. When you become as clearly enlightened as Robert did all at once, and Ramana had exactly the same experience when he was 16 instead of 14. It wasn't the same for Ramakrishna and Sargadada, though. But when you become so totally enlightened that quickly, then the body is immaterial. It's irrelevant, And everybody has to get out somehow. We all have to die of something. But they didn't die. Joel died. His heart stopped. And Emma had a moment of concern over this. And Joel said to Emma, not the body there, but Joel said to Emma, "Oh, Emma, you know better than that." And she said, "Yes, I do," and dropped all her grief and all her difficulties with it. He was right there. "Oh, Emma, you know better than that." When the Karoli Baba died, the ones who were really close to him saw him dancing on his funeral pyre. When Robert died, I had no idea that he died, and I woke up about 4 o'clock in the morning, And my room was filled with this most incredible feeling of love that I've ever felt in my life. You know, I mean, whoa, what's this? You know, I mean, wow, and this amazing feeling of love filled me for I don't know how long. And then it diminished, and I went back to sleep. And I found out the following afternoon that Robert had died the previous night. Now, tell me he didn't stop by on his way out. You know? Okay? Nobody dies. I was so closely attuned to Robert that that could happen to me, even though I was totally unaware of it, you know. So I'm sure the people that were right there with him had awesome experience. Well, I had an awesome experience, you know. Hell of a gift. So there's just no question about that.
So you're saying he didn't actually die of the park? I thought you started to say something about they didn't actually die of what they have been. I mean, maybe I misunderstood you.
They don't die, period.
Right. Well, their body.
Their bodies stop for whatever story that body wants to stop for. Rajneesh.
Not certain.
Rajneesh had a body that had a lot of pain and a lot of difficulties, and he decided to leave one day. And he had his really close disciples with him, and he took them around his house and said, you love this, you can have this, you love this, you can have this, you love this. And he gave one thing to each of his 10 or 12 closest disciples. Then he got his number one disciple, who was also a medical doctor, went into his bedroom, lay down in his bed, the guy put his hand on his pulse and watched it go to zero. I mean, he just left. All right? So, I have no idea what Robert's story was. I know he had Parkinson's to the point that he couldn't talk, but he certainly hadn't had it long enough that it would degenerate to kill him. Ramana Maharshi had badly degenerative cancer and kept laughing at people who thought he had cancer. I keep trying to tell you, it's a great teaching tool. To be sitting there dying of cancer in front of your people laughing about it, reminding them that there's no such thing as dying of cancer. You know? So where are we? At good and evil. Huh?
Good and evil.
Good.
Our first. Since what we call evil is nothing more than this universal belief in more than one power, expressing itself, whatever a mind responds to it, it follows that the person that apparently perpetrates the evil act is not evil. She or he is in fact a spiritual being, an expression of what is. But in human experience, in the role that they are playing, the person is at a level of consciousness which is receptive to certain fear-based beliefs in human consciousness, that hypnotize in her or him into doing things that we call evil. There's no such thing as an evil person, just an ignorant one. And there are actions we label evil, and there are beliefs we call evil in universal human consciousness. But it's never part of an individual. This was the premise upon which Joel was able to accomplish such amazing healings. He separated the error from the person, making it easier to lift the person above it.
You get that? Contrary to things we like to righteously believe about how bad that person is and how evil that person is, and actually what they are is ignorantly being used by human consciousness to express evil impersonally. Not that a human consciousness has an intent to do that, it's just that these beliefs that we call evil happen to be picked up by this person and expressed there. Go ahead.
We experience our concepts of what is expression of what is self as individual beings. We experience the concepts and universal human belief which we accept. We experience finite dualistic conditioned concepts of what is expression of itself as individual being. And the experience can be harmonious or erroneous based on what concepts are being formed in mind. We give power to evil not only by believing in it, but also by fighting it. Resisting evil is a statement that we believe that the evil exists and has power. We are sustaining the impersonal belief by resisting it.
Good behavior is just as impersonal as evil behavior is. person approaching transcendental consciousness may appear to be good, but that too is not the person. That is the lack of the person. The personal sense becoming transparent. The good is the expression of what is as nature of infinite perfection and harmony through the individual. What we call good from a truly good person is what is expressing itself as good. But it's still a concept. Good behavior is just as much a concept in the illusion, in this dream, as evil behavior is. There is no difference. There's just human concepts. It's just that we've moved from a concept that is dictated by universal human beliefs to a concept that is dictated by what is.
So evil is just human consciousness expressing, and good is just what is expressing. Personally, through whatever vehicle is susceptible to it or is attuned to it. All impersonal.
It's all just the outpicturing of our beliefs. We're seeing what we believe. When we see disease, we're really seeing our belief in disease. When we see poverty, we're seeing our belief in poverty. When we see man's inhumanity to man, we're seeing our belief in inhumanity. When we see error, we're not seeing a belief that all there is what is, that all there is this one eternal, harmonious, blissful experience that the mystics all report. When we are dehypnotized, we'll see things in their true light. We'll be using mind as an instrument for having an experience more like what is.
Good. You haven't read it?
Yeah.
Question.
Here.
I am not the body.
I am not the body. What we see with our five senses are very limited human concepts of reality. If we are spiritual beings, and if the expression of what is a spiritual expression, then we must agree that we've never seen each other. We are spiritual creations, spiritual expressions, not material or corporeal. Each of us has a different concept, which we're seeing right now, but we've never seen each other as we really are. What we're seeing is what universal human consciousness believes. What we're seeing are finite concepts of what is, consistent with the finite senses that we believe we have, and the finite human bodies that we believe we are.
Human consciousness believes that we are bodies and minds. We as spiritual beings don't have bodies and minds that are associated with the human experience. These body-mind concepts are part of human consciousness in mind. Most of us, when we say, I am, are talking about our body and our mind, but that's not who we are. I am is really the impersonal, individual expression of consciousness that I am. The I that I am today and the I that I was 25 years ago are identical. My body was younger then. In fact, every cell in my body was different. The content of my mind was different. Almost every idea, thought, and belief that I had then is no longer here. Almost nothing that was there then is here now. Yet I know that who I was then and who I am now are the same person. And when I was 20, that was also me. And when I was 5, still the same me. The I that I really feel I am, that has been constant throughout my entire life, is the awareness, this consciousness. The picture of a personal body-mind mechanism within mind is changing. But who I am is the I that I have always been, that I was before I took this body, that I will be after I leave this body, that I is the awareness, the consciousness, that the expression of what is. That is the expression of what is.
Can you get in touch with that? You get the sense that you right now have a sense of I am, of I, my being, and can you think back to 20 years ago and think that you thought then, I am doing this, or I have this, and that sense of I is identical now to what it was 20 years ago. And yet there's nothing consistent between that I and this I. I mean, not a single cell in my body is the same. Not a single thought in my head. Let me go back 29 and a half years when I was at the end of my alcoholism. You know, there wasn't a thought in that head that's in this head. Okay? There's no contact, nothing at all similar between that person, identical between that person and this person, and yet it was me, wasn't it? I just know it was me, and so was the 5-year-old. I remember falling out of a tree when I was 5. That was me. There's just no question about it. You guess that all of us know, if we look at it, know instinctively that the I that I am is the consciousness, the awareness. It's the awareness of this body and mind that is what I am. Get that? Everybody get that? Can you do that? Can you play that game yourself?
But there's a memory.
Yeah. And
It's still the same. The cells are all different, and everything is not the same, and it's not there anymore, but there's a memory.
That's right.
Where's that? Not
That's in your consciousness.
the human consciousness,
No, your consciousness, individual consciousness.
not individual God consciousness.
It's in the... We'll get into that next week when we start talking about the human condition, which is what next week's thing is. But the fact is that the impersonal individual expression, which is consciousness, has parts to it. And that individual consciousness incarnates as a body, and it's within the body that the personality and all that is. But there's like a karmic bank and a data bank and such like that you bring with you. If you were able to do it, you could remember every single minute of every single lifetime you've ever existed during. 1,000, 10,000 of them. All that data is still there in you. But it's not in your brain, in which every cell has changed in the last 7 years. Okay? It's in your consciousness, your individual consciousness. That's part of the impersonal individual consciousness. It's all there in the data bank. You can remember past lives. You can remember as much detail in past lives as somebody is trained to help you remember. You will, in fact, remember whatever details of past lives are necessary to do what you're doing here. You can. So there is a data bank that comes with it. That's where scripts come from. You come in with your script. That's the data bank. It's called samsaras and sanskaras in Sanskrit. We come in with our past history and our past conditioning and our past karma. Okay? Part of the package.
But just to bring it full circle, that I am is the same I am that you are, that everyone is the one I am.
Mm-hmm. In the sense that we're all dying. But we are individual facets.
And the more I see who I am, the more I get a glimpse of who everyone else.
But we're at the highest level, yeah, we're all diamond. But at the individual, impersonal expression, we're facets. But it's all one, and we're all Indra's net. I love that. Another ancient Indian expression where Indra is one of the gods, I think. But the picture is a picture of individual. In this case, rather than one diamond with us being the facet, each person is an individual diamond, many, many faceted diamonds. And the design is such that each diamond is reflected in exactly one facet of every other diamond. So that we're all showing up in one facet of each other diamond, so that we're all inextricably linked together, so that if anybody moves, everybody moves, It's the same thing. It's all oneness. All there is consciousness. with our opening premise. All there is consciousness. One consciousness. Expressed.
Kind of like a grand tapestry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tapestry is another common expression they use. But the interesting thing about the tapestry is that every thread, this tapestry is that every thread touches every other thread.
Yeah. And the human consciousness, slipping a little thread here, ripples through the tapestry, pulls many other links.
The only way you can do that is with omnipresence, where everywhere is here. Yep. Where everywhere is here, then everything can affect everything else. Otherwise, we have these time and space limitations and stuff like that. Although not really. So the point, I guess the useful stuff that we can take with us is to really, and work on, is to really get the extent to which we're hypnotized. And go back and look at those words and realize that if you see evil, you're hypnotized. If you see disease, you're hypnotized. If you see lack, you're hypnotized. If you see injury, you're hypnotized. If you see anything at all like that, you're hypnotized. Okay? Get that. And get the Leelaa, get what the Leelaa is all about. And play the game with I am. And see if you can see. If you play with that, you can maybe become aware of pure awareness. Because if all my body cells have changed and if all my thoughts have changed, then the thing that's constant is the thing that's been aware of all these body cells and all these thoughts, okay? And there's the pure awareness, okay? There's nothing to it except the awareness, okay? So maybe you can get a sense of pure awareness, which is the other way I get a peek at that is to think of the fact that I'm aware that I'm aware, okay? Who's that aware? That's the one, okay? The one that's aware that I'm aware.
Is that the one, even in dreams, that I was saying before, that there's still this material connection to the me in the dream, but there's still that aspect that's almost kind of sitting back watching.
Sure, there is, yeah. And it's only because we're very limited that we get confused by that. Robert didn't know sometimes whether he was at that moment having a dream or a vision or was awake, because it was all identical to him. It's all dreams, visions, and being awake, hypnotized or unhypnotized, so to speak, are all images in mind. Okay? Of exactly the same stuff. It's not like the awake images are solider than the dream images. It's all images made of exactly the same stuff. You know, there's just no difference at all. And if the Indians talk a lot about the three states of consciousness are waking, sleeping, and dreaming. Waking and dreaming and deep sleep. And what we're talking about is the fourth state of consciousness, okay? Which is the state of consciousness that is neither awake nor asleep nor dreaming. And that's back to the same awareness. That's the same awareness that can see all these three states, okay? What we are shooting for is to be 24/7 in the fourth state of awareness. Conscious of ourselves when we're awake, and conscious of ourselves when we're asleep, and conscious of ourselves when we're dreaming. Robert had that. Robert, his body rested, but he was awake. And Rashneesh the same way. His body rested, but he was aware always that whether his body was resting or had his eyes closed and was sleeping or was dreaming. Or, no, that's interesting. It's dreaming, you know, because he was so clearly not it. And the only reason we don't see that ourselves right now is because we're so locked into thinking we are it. We think it's me dreaming. So we get sucked into the dream. What else? Time's up. Let's get quiet for a minute. Let's gently come together. Oh, I can talk now about hypnosis. One thing, the reason we meditate for 15 minutes before the class is because in doing so, we get lifted out of the hypnosis to some extent to where we have a chance of hearing the class. And that's why it's important to be here for the meditation, because if you're not here for the meditation, the rest of us are hearing stuff you ain't hearing, because you're still in the sludge. So that's why we meditate at the start, is to lift ourselves out of the hypnosis as high as we can, as high as we can get together, so that we can have a higher class. Okay? Okay, thanks. Love y'all.